with literary agents, publishing professionals, and lots of my favorite authors. You can find hundreds of interviews available at middlegradeninja.com, including an interview with today's guest, literary agent John Rudolph, who has sat patiently through this entire intro. John, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Rob. How are you doing?
I am very excited to talk with you, and I really appreciate you making time to be here with us.
My pleasure.
I always say that there's one thing I'm terrible about. It's summarizing other people's books and other people's biographies. So if you would, if we could begin with just you telling a little bit of esteemed audience, a little bit about your background and an overview of your career thus far.
Sure. So I am a literary agent at Dystel and Goderich, actually Dystel, Goderich and Bourret, I should say, DG&B. I have been there, I think it's going to be 9 years in, 9 years in August. And prior to that, I was an editor at Putnam Books for Young Readers. I was there for about 8 years. Prior to that, I was at Simon and Schuster, where I started out as an editorial assistant. And that was Simon and Schuster Books for Young Readers as well. So I was a children's book editor for 12 years. The long story short, the layoffs hit. I was kind of checked out at that point anyway from Putnam. So when Jane Dystel asked me about whether I wanted to be an agent, it seemed like, a good opportunity, good way to sort of do some different things. And also on the children's side, at least, to be able to represent all kinds of authors and illustrators. As when I was an editor, I was sort of getting pushed to either specialize in fiction or specifically middle grade, actually. And as an agent, I really love the fact that I can represent picture books, YA, middle grade, nonfiction, pretty much anything as long as I can sell it. So at this point, my list is about, I would say, 65% kids books and maybe 35% adult nonfiction. On the children's side, I work with most of the author illustrators on our list. And that was actually another really good reason for me to join Dystel, was that when I started, we weren't really repping picture books and illustrators. And Jane, to her credit, was very open to the idea of bringing in illustrators to the firm and expanding that part of our business. So I work with most of our author illustrators. I do quite a bit of middle grade, a smaller amount of young adult, and then I've been doing the last few years quite a bit of nonfiction at various levels. Picture book, middle grade, and even a YA, a couple of YA nonfiction projects. Let's see, Dystel is a mid-sized agency, I would say. We're up to, I think, 15 employees right now and 10 agents. Between us, we cover the entire spectrum of publishing, adult fiction, adult nonfiction, children's, and anything and everything in between. We're based in New York, but we have an office in LA. And that's pretty much the size of it.
And for the uninitiated, who are some of the clients that you have worked with and are currently working with?
Let's see. On the picture book side, I work with Teague Bentley, whose book Little Penguin Gets the Hiccups, and its sequels have done extremely nicely for us. They're featured in Target, which is always a great boost to sales. Wendy Wahman, another picture book author, Brandon Todd, let's see, fiction, Leslie Youngblood, whose middle grade novel Love Like Sky came out last fall. YA, Alison Van Diepen, who's been published, has had a long career in YA. She's been published by Simon and Schuster, HarperCollins, Scholastic. So yeah, those are a few.
And so, well, a couple of questions for you.
Okay, just a couple,
Hopefully,
right?
we've got time. We'll fire right away. Well, let's start with this because we've been kind of getting an overview, been talking with,
Mhm.
having the good fortune to talk with so many editors and other previous agents. Just kind of getting an overview of how publishing works as a whole. And so, one
Okay.
question I like to ask, and kind of demystifying things, so that we can get information beyond just staring at a page online or in a publisher's marketplace.
Hmm.
How did you get your career started as an editor originally?
Well, I honestly, I don't really know. I still to this day don't know why I was hired at Simon and Schuster, other than, and this is terrible, but I had a friend of a friend who worked there, and beyond that, I guess good grades in college. I had been. When I graduated college with a degree in classics, which is super useful. I
I
was
actually
really.
had that same degree, but go
Oh
on.
yeah, okay.
Oh yeah,
What are you doing with it?
this.
Yes. Okay, there you go. So it is useful, actually. No, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. I thought I might want to go to law school. I realized I didn't want to go to law school. And I had a friend who was working at Simon and Schuster Adult who really enjoyed it. Loved the idea that you could actually work on books for a living, read for a living, and I'd actually worked a summer at the Strand bookstore in the city, and so it was a rough job. I mean, it was a lot of dirty, sweaty work with some pretty creepy people, but but it didn't turn me off totally. And actually, it was a great job in that it sort of demystified books for me, and you realize that books are they're books are meant to be sold. They're a commodity to be sold, and they're a commodity to be manufactured as well. And when I got into book publishing, I really sort of loved the idea of actually making something physical, as opposed to just as a lawyer, pushing one piece of paper from one side of the room to the other. So I somehow I got the job, and it was in children's as an editorial assistant. And at the time, I thought, well, okay, I've got my foot in the door. I'll do 6 months in kids, and then maybe go upstairs and join the grown-ups. And well, it's 20 years later. I fell in love with kids books when I started. This was in 1997. And interestingly, I worked with David Gale, who was one of the great young adult editors going back to the 1970s. I mean, he sort of created the young adult genre, at least as a sales genre. But in the 90s, the young adult marketplace was so bad that he had actually been tasked with acquiring some picture books. And so we started acquiring picture books, and I just fell in love with the fact that you could work with artists, and that the artists who were doing the work were artists of the highest caliber. One of the first books that picture books that I worked on with David was John Lithgow's picture book debut, The Remarkable Farkle McBride, which was illustrated by C.F. Payne, who is just brilliant. And I mean, his illustrations are like Rockwell level paintings, and just that opportunity to work with artists just really just blew my mind. And I stayed in that. One of the nice things about kids books in those days was that assistants tended to get promoted more quickly than on the adult side. So my career moved up at a nice clip. And then also it was when Harry Potter came out. So all of a sudden, kids books were exciting. And Simon and Schuster had the Olivia series that started then. And, that was just huge. I mean, it sold zillions of copies. They also had all the Eloise reissues, and that got our publisher on the Today Show. So 23 years old, and you're working in in New York, and your publisher's on the Today Show, and you're doing these great books with these great artists, and it just that was it for me. And then so when an opportunity opened at Putnam to start building my list, I went over there and brought a couple people over, but really just start from scratch there and did kind of a full list of picture books, middle grade and young adult.
So what is it that moved you from classics to middle grade specifically, but also picture books and some young adult, but with this focus on children's literature? When I assume you're more than capable of working with adult fiction all day, and of course you do with a portion of the list. What is it about middle grade that grabs your attention, and you said makes up about 60% of your list?
Well, I'd say it's more like about 50% is of my children's books. I'd say about 50% is picture books, and maybe then 30 or so is middle grade. I think middle grade. Well, just so with the picture books, I had studied some art in college, and I kind of came to it late in college, like junior and senior year, and by then I was sort of like, wow, gee, maybe I should have been an art history major. So, working with artists, that was a really big thing for me. But with the middle grade, I don't know. I felt like I gravitated toward, in a big way, sort of the plot heavy aspect of it. There was something about kind of the adventures that characters in middle grade novels go on, and this obviously is speaking very, very broadly, right? That appealed to me more, I guess, more than sort of the inward looking teen dramas. Not that I didn't enjoy that kind of stuff. I think, and I still do, but as a genre to work on, I think it just, I don't know, for whatever reason it appealed to me more. I think also I just wasn't all that familiar with it as a kid. I've talked about in my bio before that I wasn't a great reader as a kid. I read a lot of comic books, read a lot of Tintin comics, and I remember reading some sort of stuff like Encyclopedia Brown and the Great Brain series, but I don't really remember, nothing of that age kind of stuck with me in the way that that it does for some editors, and so coming to it as an adult, for whatever reason, just sort of struck a chord with me more.
So what was it that turned you around as a reader, that you went from not a big reader as a child to obviously majoring in the classics in school?
Well, one thing about the classics is, when you're doing translations, it's actually a pretty short chunk of text. So, you're not, you don't have to read these big long books so that you might as an English major. No, actually, it's so when I was in college, I took a couple of American Studies courses, and actually European Studies, American Studies, and they were basically great books classes, and taught by some some excellent professors who were just were great, but it was a huge reading load, and I one of them, which I took my senior year, I remember. Two of them I took my senior year. The coursework, although you were supposed to read these, classics, I don't know, Anna Karenina, and just, long, I think we started with the Inferno and went through early 20th century, read some Proust. The only coursework for it was you were supposed to write like a 1-page appreciation paper every week. And sometimes the question was, what's the best section of this 900-page book and why? Well, that's pretty easy, right? So when I graduated, I had piles of these, the classics of American literature that I'd never read. And between college and becoming an editor, between that and Simon and Schuster, I spent a year living in Boston, where I kind of had an idea of working in publishing. Couldn't really find a decent job there. I mean, Little Brown was still up there at that point, Houghton Mifflin, but they definitely wanted people with internships and experience and stuff, which I didn't have. So I had quite a bit of downtime. I finally ended up working for a journal of cellular biology, which was quite an experience. But anyway, point is, I had a lot of downtime to read, and when I was doing that, I was just like, oh, this is making me happy. So that kind of sort of fed into my idea that maybe I should go into publishing, because I'm really liking reading as an adult, and I mean, I think if ever you college graduate could just get 3 months to just kick back and read the books that they didn't read in college, they might actually really appreciate it quite a bit more.
You've just given hope to, I know we've got lots of librarians and English teachers who listen to the show, and they're hearing this and say, oh, I've got a stubborn reader in my class now, but there's hope that could be John Rudolph in a few years.
Yes. Yeah. Just, make sure that when you graduate from college, you got a degree in classics and are basically unemployed.
You'll be ready and primed to read.
Right. All right.
And so how does your